another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. As always, to learn and to grow. I know you have a busy schedule and there's a million things you could be doing. So I really appreciate that you take the time to join me here. And as always, I have one quick favor to ask right off the top. If you do get some value from this episode, please do share it. Put it up on LinkedIn, send a link to your friend via text, or take a screenshot and throw it up on Instagram or Facebook, wherever you spend your time. Please let our colleagues know that we're having these conversations because these are very, very important conversations. I think you will agree with today's conversation being absolutely important. We are going to be talking about remote optometry. Is it good? Is it bad? Should we be looking into it or should we not? We are going to learn from somebody who has implemented it in their practice and successfully done so. I'm very happy to have Dr. Mindy Blumberg on the podcast today. She is a graduate of Waterloo in 2016. She is an entrepreneur at heart, which I love because that's something we love talking about on the 2020 podcast. She is the owner of 2 practices that are in a rural setting here in BC. And she is definitely an advocate of remote optometry. And we're going to learn a lot from Dr. Blumberg about how she's implemented remote optometry, why she thinks it is such an important part of optometry and something that we should embrace. So thank you so much, Mindy, for joining me here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's amazing to have you on. I'm really excited to have this conversation. As we've kind of talked about a couple of times off air now, it's, I think, a bit of a contentious topic, but I think it's something that we need to wrap our heads around quickly. Otherwise, it might be something that affects our profession in a way that we don't want it to. So we'll talk more about that. But first, why don't you, Mindy, please tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you practice.
Okay, so I'm an entrepreneur. I cold started 2 practices in 2 years.
Wow.
I opened my first practice in Pemberton in 2020 and was crazy enough to open a second location in Lillooet in 2021.
Amazing.
So I'm
after
definitely
COVID.
Yeah, after COVID. So
Okay.
yes,
And
it was exciting times.
I can imagine. That really does take a certain type of person, certain amount of courage. So good for you for doing that.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that process has kind of been for you now, 2 cold start practices in such a short period of time.
Yeah, honestly, I loved it. I really enjoy being able to provide optometry services to these towns. They never had an optometrist before, so that was just very nice. Feeling very welcomed in communities, and being able to offer specialty eye care to communities that have never had optometrists before. It's very exciting.
Well, absolutely. I could imagine in that scenario, then they would welcome you and you would definitely become part of that community pretty quickly. How far apart are Pemberton and Lillooet?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's an hour and a half over a mountain pass that frequently gets closed because of avalanches.
Okay.
So it's over the Duffy Lake Road. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that definitely, I imagine, plays into this conversation of remote optometry. Sometimes you literally cannot get to your other office because the roads are not open. Okay. And you are now a mother of a young child, and I know that plays into the equation as well. And you're the sole owner of these 2 practices. Is that correct?
Yes. Solo optometrist.
Solo optometrist. And as we know, in BC and many other places, finding associate ODs is a tough thing to do. I imagine, especially when they're more rural settings like that. So that's kind of played into your story a little bit as well.
Yes, exactly.
So tell me about how you got to the point of even considering remote optometry. Was it something right off the bat when you opened your first practice, or were there a few things that happened before it came to your mind?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. I had never thought about this. I never thought that I would want to do it. I was doing mobile clinics in Bella Coola, and the BCDO, so the BC Association of Optometrists, has a rural access program. So they set up a remote optometry lane in the New Hawk Nation band office. So it was a big step up from using handhelds to being able to use, OCTs, 4-opters, have an autorefractor. It was amazing. And that kind of just opened my eyes to what is possible.
So tell me a little bit more about Bella Coola. First of all, geographically, I think even people here in BC are not super familiar with Bella Coola, but people who are somewhere else in Canada or United States, how can we set the stage? Where is it? How far is the nearest city or hospital or optometry clinic?
Yeah, the nearest optometry clinic is 5 hours away. It
Wow. Okay.
is a crazy highway. It's literally called The Hill, and it is a dirt road. No, yeah, it's crazy. It is, and, you start off on the Chilcotin Plateau and you drop down to the coast, and it's a dirt road. There's no railings. It's
Wow.
definitely a really cool drive, but not something you'd want to do for a commute,
Right.
especially if you had an eye issue. Even transportation is very difficult.
Right. So there in Bella Coola, at the bottom of the hill, um, there was a mobile clinic that was set up by the BCDO, or
Yeah.
there was already a mobile clinic there before?
No, it was all just practitioners or optometrists setting up a clinic in the band office or the town to service
Okay,
the community.
I see.
And BCDO, because of the size of the town of Bella Coola, they had funding to provide this optometry lane.
Gotcha. So you were already there doing these clinics, like you would pop in from time to time for a short period of time, do some eye exams, and then head out again?
Yes.
Okay. And then at some point or another, BCDO came in and set up an actual lane.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. All right. So I like to take a second to give a big shout out to the BCDO because our association is pretty amazing, and all the board members and everybody involved do such a great job. And that's certainly one of the nice things that they have done. One of the many. So big shout out to BCDO, and I'm glad that that had an impact on you because obviously that set you off in a different sort of a trajectory, right? So what happened then? They came in, they set up this clinic or the lane and Bella Coola, and then what? How did the wheels start turning in your mind?
So I had an associate, and she was not going to renew her contract. So I was forced to either close down a newly open clinic that I love or do something different. And so I set up a remote optometry lane in my office in Lillooet, and it was awesome. It was a huge learning curve. Like, it was crazy. I feel like that in itself was like a very courageous thing to do because not a lot of people were doing it.
Right.
I'd done a ton of research, but I really didn't know what to expect. So, yeah, it was awesome. Like, in the end, it all worked out and patients were very happy with the service. And our feedback has been amazing. It's been like a very thorough eye exam, not being rushed, had lots of time with the doctor.
Interesting.
And yeah, people are really happy.
We definitely want to dive into that, but before we get into that, I want to know from so that you had an associate who was not renewing her contract. How much time did you need to get from like, uh-oh, what am I going to do to, okay, I'm going to install remote optometry, and then from having the thought about remote optometry to actually having it physically installed in your office? What was that time period?
It wasn't a lot. I want to say I went to Bella Coola at the end of June, and I had everything installed in my office in August.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty impressive because I know I would have sat on that for a lot longer. Like, okay, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do it? So then let's talk about the process because I think there's, myself included, lots of people listening who are going to be interested in remote optometry but don't really know how to get started in even getting it set up in their office, let alone like the actual process of doing the eye exam. But like, what were the first steps to actually getting the right technology in your practice?
Research. I mean, almost everything can be found, right? Like, you can choose whatever company you'd like to go with to find this technology and be able to use it. So I think I don't know. I feel like it's just figuring it out and choosing what's going to be best for you. And
Hmm.
I can help with that because I know that there are a lot of questions with this type of technology. And if you're a private practice and you're not going with a big company, that would be something I would love to help with.
Yeah. And that's something we'll definitely talk about that towards the end because you are providing resources to help ODs with this process. And I definitely want to make sure we shout that out and so people know where to find you. But would you say reaching out to one of the companies that provides some of the technology, is that the right way? Or just at our meetings, like for example, at the BCDO or our association provincial meeting, or going to larger meetings and asking questions there? Is that the right approach, or just looking online and reaching out to companies online? What's the best way to get started?
So what I did was I contacted all the companies that offer remote optometry, and I found Dr. Alexander Job, who is he's also a very big advocate for remote exams, and he's awesome. And he basically like helped us set our clinic up to be a remote optometry clinic. And yeah, it was awesome. So he's super helpful, and I looked at all the options and I thought I made the right decision, and it's worked out really well. So, I mean, get all the information that you can from reps and see what the prices are, that kind of thing, and see how it works. And I think demoing it is probably a really good idea. So, whether it be at Opto Fair or wherever else, that's a very good spot to start. And then a lot of the equipment that you have in your office can probably be transitioned into this like high-tech equipment. If you have a newer slit lamp, the only thing that you would probably need is like a digital 4-opter.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we then let's walk through the actual exam itself. Let's say a patient walks in the clinic and they've been checked in and everything. How does the process of the actual eye exam, from pre-test to the end of the eye exam, what are the steps there?
Yeah, so kind of like a typical eye exam, you start with like an intake form, get some case history and health medications, all that good stuff. And then you do your pretest. So you do an autorefractor, NCT, pachymetry if you have it. You can do topography if you'd like. You do posterior seg camera. So I really like the Optos, highly recommend that. And an OCT. So you want to do OCT of the macula, OCT of the optic nerve. Then you do a visual field. I recommend doing a 24-2. And you do entrance testing. So that would be cover test, ocular motor, motility, and just checking to see if there's anything, a gross BB defect. You definitely want them back for more BB testing. Basically, all of this stuff is like screening, right? It's your pre-test, it's screening. You're seeing if they have any issues, and if they do, you'd want them to come back for like a functional vision assessment, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. From there, they'd go into the exam room and you do the slit lamp camera. So you train a tech on how to do that, and they do the same thing every single time. So it's really easy for them. And then you come online and you see the patient, and you get introduced and have another case history discussion. Then you do your digital 4-opter. So you connect into your 4-opter, you do their prescription. You can do a lot of BB testing in the 4-opter as well, which I'm finding to be very helpful. And then after that, you have their prescription. So you can either like discuss glasses, and then you can continue on to do the ocular health assessment. So that's what's actually really cool about remote optometry, is that you can see everything that's going on in their eye and show them in photos. So if you don't have a slit lamp camera already, even if you're not going to do this, just get a slit lamp camera, because it's pretty awesome. You can show them everything that's going on. You can see exactly why they have dry eyes, or you can show them where their cataracts are. It's definitely a wow factor for patients.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so there's obviously this is all tech driven, right? So you're at home, or the doctor is wherever they are, but there's a tech in the office who's running all these tests, and the tech is doing VAs, the tech is doing cover tests, all of that. They're trained to do all of that.
They're trained to do whatever you want them to do.
Fair enough.
So you set your protocol and they will follow it. And if they're not doing a good job, then you give them feedback, and they can do whatever you're allowed to delegate and whatever you train them to.
Right. So, okay, then all of that pre-testing will be done. The optomaps are taken. 24-2, you're running a full visual field or a screening type of a test?
Yeah, we do full visual field.
Okay, so that takes a little bit of time. But I guess when you're doing the remote optometry, you delegate or you designate a certain amount of time for all of those things. OCTs are done. Patient ends up in the exam chair. Then you come online. Can Can you tell me the software that you use? I don't know anything about that software. So what kind of software does one use for remote optometry?
I use Harmony, which is part of the Topcon RDX system. There's lots of software available, so there's lots of options.
Sure. Harmony just sounds nice, so that's
Mhm.
fair.
Yeah.
That's a good name for TopCon to use. Everything works together in harmony. I like that. So you have the RDX system from TopCon. So the Phoropter is a TopCon Phoropter.
Mhm.
Um, and there are companies that, and we can say names or whatever. We're not limited by anything here, but like TopCon's RDX system is one I've heard of a few times as being one where everything kind of works together pretty well. So when you're doing and the slit lamp, is that also a TopCon slit lamp, or is that a different? That's a different one.
No, I have a different system. It's like the Marco Ion.
Marco
Yeah.
Ion. Okay, and that's a digital slit lamp, so you could take video and photos. Obviously, you need that for remote optometry because that needs to be then sent to you, right? So, when you come online, you've already seen the slit lamp images. They've been
Yeah.
sent to you. Okay. And then, so you take a few minutes to review that. And so the tech is trained to take photos and videos from certain angles with certain magnification and certain beams and all of that. You've trained them to do all these very specific protocols beforehand.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. And with that, you feel like you're able to assess the anterior seg as well as you need to. You could see everything you would normally see.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you want to see anything else, you just have them back for a follow-up, right?
Yeah.
Because it's probably going to be a follow-up for dry eyes or
Right.
something like that, or glaucoma, So yeah, you do need to see patients for follow-ups. It's not going to be a one and done thing, but I
Right.
hope that most private practices do that anyway.
Right. Exactly. So the reason I'm asking all these questions is, well, one, personal interest. I'm
Mhm.
intrigued, curious, but I know there's going to be our friends and colleagues out there who are curious and also maybe a little cynical. So I want to try to touch on as many of these little things as we can. So when they hear this, they understand, okay, what would happen if this or that, right? So certainly there are follow-ups required, return visits required in some cases when things are not completely normal across the board. So if there's something you find on the Optomap, or if there's something you find in the anterior segment or a BV, something shows up, you would have them come back, and then they would be seen in person. Um,
Mhm.
so how about, do you do myography by any chance? Is that something you do as part of this remote? Okay.
I don't have a bibliographer.
Okay. Do you think that's something that could fit, or is that not,
I
would
think
that
that's
not really work in
also
this?
a dry eye assessment. I think that's a dry eye assessment
Got you.
tool versus a screening tool. But everybody has their own kind of thoughts on that. I'm
Yeah,
not saying that it wouldn't be a great thing to have. It would probably open the doors to have more people come back in for dry eye assessments.
sure.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking from our practice perspective. So we do lower lid myography on all adults as part of their screening, but we're not doing remote optometry. So I don't know if it would really fit into that suite of tests that you do as remote. But in office, then I show that myography to every patient. Like, by the
Mhm.
way, we looked at your lids, and here's what it looks like. I'm curious to see if that might fit in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, more information for the doctor to look at before you see the patient.
Mhm. Yeah, curious, like, why would you do it differently for a
Right.
patient right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, if it works, yeah, of course. I'd like to be able to do it for all of those patients too. If I know I can have them come back for a dry eye consultation, um, then I think it's more than worthwhile having it, as long as it fits in. I just don't know how the software works, so I'm wondering if it's something that's reviewable and that's something you can show the patient while you're going through all of their, um, assessment and plan and all that kind of thing. Digital refraction, especially remotely, do you find it any more complicated than doing an in-person refraction?
No, I really don't. It does take some getting used to, but other than that, I don't have any issues.
So there's not anything glaring that you feel like you're missing when you're doing a digital refraction. I'm again asking from a more of a naive perspective here. Do you feel like you wish you could be doing a test that you can't do?
I can do all the tests. So I guess everything except for RET,
Right.
right? If you need a
Which
RET,
is Yeah.
you
You
obviously
can't do that remotely anyways.
you
That's
can't do that remotely.
that's
So
fair. That's a fair point. So, and again, if there's somebody who maybe needs ret, you wouldn't be doing a remote exam on them. Fair enough. All right. So let's go to the patient experience. Then you were mentioning this earlier, that patients are giving you really great feedback. They feel like they got a comprehensive exam. Were you nervous about that in the beginning? Like, were you afraid that maybe people were going to think that they were getting less than a comprehensive exam?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like most people that, are optometrists and start their own clinics, you think like, oh yeah, everyone's going to want to see me. Like nobody's going to want to see anybody else. And it's, it's actually really great that people are adaptable and they can, get used to other things. And when you're doing these exams, as long as you have a doctor that takes time to listen and care about the patient and your staff is trained really well to take them through that experience, I think it's a success.
That's great. And generally speaking, you're hearing this kind of positive feedback that people are happy with the experience and the service they got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Let's talk about that staff training part, because it sounds like to me, out of all of this, like you got to have the system in place, and of course, you have to be as the owner of the practice, you have to be willing and brave enough to make this investment and the change in the way you practice. But this is the one person they're interacting with throughout the entire process is the tech. How did you go about training that person? Was there a resource that you used? Was there just intuition from your side that you knew that tech needed to know these certain things?
You just have to spend a lot of time training people in general. I mean, even as optometrists, we actually didn't get a lot of training
Mm,
for how to interact with patients, right? So whatever you know as your optometrist and whatever values your clinic has, you have to now translate that into how your staff are going to be communicating with patients. And I mean, hopefully your staff is all adaptable and into high tech optometry, and so they like learning this, right?
yeah,
It's something really interesting. They have, they have a lot of responsibility, and patient they get a lot of time with them, so that they build relationships with your patients, which is
right.
really important.
So again, was it just sort of like based on what you knew you needed through the exam that you trained them to do? Or like, for example, with the slit lamp, did you know, like, how did you go about deciding like which angles and which videos and which photos to make it more efficient? Of course, we know how to use a slit lamp and we can swing the light, the beam around all day long and kind of see the things that we want to see. But when as a tech doing it, we don't want them sitting there
Mhm.
for 10 minutes, right?
Yeah,
So how did you go about deciding exactly which images to provide you as
right.
the optometrist?
Yeah, so I think everybody that went to Waterloo at the same time as me remember Dr. Freddo's like 6 sweep slit lamp routine, and that is literally what I taught them
Okay.
what to do. Yeah, so that's it, you can't miss a thing. Dr. Freddo knows.
Even I know who Dr. Fredo is because he was at NECO before he went to Waterloo. So just towards the end, or I think right when I started is when he left to go to Waterloo. So he's kind of made himself a legend in more than one school, that's for sure. So Dr. Fredo knows.
Yeah.
Got good. That's good. I might have to learn the Dr. Fredo protocol from you because I don't actually know it, but that's interesting. Okay, good. So now we understand how you kind of implemented this in your practice, how valuable it's been for you because you're going between the two practices. Now, are you the only one seeing the patients or do you have other associates somewhere else seeing patients as well?
Yeah, I have other associates. So, like I said previously, Dr. Alexander Job is working at my clinic and seeing a lot of patients remotely. And then I do a lot of the in person and you do some remote as well.
Gotcha. Interesting. So what else could you share with somebody who is looking to kind of get into remote optometry? What are a few things that maybe bumps in the road or hiccups that you had that you could share with someone else to help them, avoid those, to make the process a little smoother for them?
Spend a lot of time training.
Fair enough.
That would be my pearl to give people is, like anything, you shouldn't be practicing on your patients. You should be, very experienced by the time you see your first patient in a remote exam, and it is different. So you do have to get used to it and modify your practice as things change and as you get more high tech.
Absolutely. Okay, so training is key. Now, the idea of remote optometry can seem a little scary to some, to many probably. There's the fear. I imagine I'm kind of trying to put together a few thoughts here. Okay, so pardon me if I'm not expressing this in the same way that somebody's listening and is saying that's not what I'm concerned about. But let me just try to put this into some sort of context. There's a fear that an online entity or some corporation could then use remote optometry to kind of capture that market, the optometry market that we, have built our brick and mortar practice trying to serve certain patients, and an online entity then can come and use remote optometry, pay optometrists just to wherever they are in the corner of whatever province or state, pay them whatever, and save themselves money having to build a brick and mortar or, whatever the case might be. Ultimately, take our patients away from us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a real fear? And I know I didn't express it in the most succinct way, but is that a fear? First of all, is that something you've heard from people, that there's a fear about remote optometry, and do you think it's a legitimate fear?
I mean,
I'd let you try to process that really poorly phrased question.
I think it's a legitimate fear because it probably is going to happen. So what we can do, hopefully, as private practices and independent optometry, which I do think does the best for patients, is, implement it in your practice, but the personality of your practice and the values of your clinic really do have to show. Patients, they could go to a site test and get their prescription, but they're choosing to come to you because you're a great optometrist. Hopefully you are doing a great job and you're, following up with that patient and making sure their vision and eye health is going to be great for the rest of their life. And we also offer specialty treatment, right? A lot of clinics offer like dry eyes, specialty contact lenses, all that good stuff. That's really important and that offers a lot of value. So having this technology in your practice will hopefully drive that kind of like primary care optometry so that you can focus more on your specialty practices. That's the goal. We'll see.
That's the goal. Absolutely. I think that's a key point though, is bringing in like the culture of your practice, the character of your practice. And I think as many things in our industry have become kind of commoditized and they go online, and there's always corporate entities that are kind of driving the, kind of this race to the bottom. We always have to kind of get better at what we do and provide a better service, because there's always going to be those types of competitors in various ways. I feel like the more conscious we are of this, the more we learn about it, ideally implement it, the more we understand about it. So when it comes to legislation and other things, we can actually make the appropriate arguments to government, to whoever, whatever bodies we need to help put certain, legislation in place to make sure that it doesn't get abused and it doesn't just, become a tidal wave that totally changes the way that the profession is heading. So I agree with you on that one for sure, that it's something that we should all be looking into. And maybe it's not a big part of your practice, but at least it's something that you understand well, and maybe it's a little bit of what you do. How about on the lifestyle side of things, Mindy? Do you feel remote optometry is something that can help give optometrists a little more of this this mythical work-life balance that we're all seeking?
I hope so. I mean, it did it for me, which I am very, very grateful for. So, having two practices, being a new mom, it's extremely overwhelming. You are, if you're busy seeing patients, you basically have another job of like growing your business. And so this allows you to have time to spend working on your business rather than in it. And like I said, it's just like important to offer eye exam availability in your practice and have that available so that when patients are referred to you for your specialty practice, you can actually have time to do that. Yeah, I think it's a win-win. I mean, patients are happy and you are happier with your work-life balance and have more time.
Yeah. And how about on optical sales side? Do you have an optical? You sell glasses?
Yes.
Do you feel that there's a difference between when you see a patient in person versus when they're seen remotely as far as optical sales go?
We haven't seen a difference.
Okay.
So we've been doing it for, a while, over 2 years, and we haven't seen a difference. So yeah.
That's great. Over 2 years is a long enough period of time. I think that's a
Mhm.
good sample size. That's
Mhm.
good to know. Excellent. All right. So let's go into the two new sort of sections of the podcast before we wrap up, and we'll talk a little bit more about. Actually, why don't we quickly talk about you're putting together a program to help other ODs kind of get into remote optometry, to implement remote optometry in their practices. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's going to be a online course and also like in-clinic coaching on that would be online. So you would get all the information that you would need to implement this in your practice, be successful, have a marketing plan, things that could take a lot of stress off of you when you're like starting a new venture. That's basically what this will do. And it helps train your staff, train optometrists. We provide information on different cases, how to deal with them, and best practices for following up, counseling, all that good stuff.
That's amazing. And where can people find this program?
It's on futureproofoptometry.com.
I like that. Futureproofoptometry.com. Very good. And Mindy, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out to you?
You can always email me. My email is Mindy Blumberg at sea2skyoptometry.com.
sea2skyoptometry.com.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Okay, great. So the two newer sections of the podcast. One of them is sort of rapid fire, few questions to help us get to know you a little bit better. And one of them is where you give us your biggest piece of advice. So let's start with the rapid fire first. Short answers, one word to one sentence type of answers. Number one would be, what gives you energy?
Being outside. I
Yeah,
love skiing, biking, all the adrenaline sports. It's
you live
where
in the right place for that. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
You
You know,
live like in the capital of the world of
yes.
those things. Absolutely. What drains your energy?
Trying to please everyone.
Mm. How do you avoid that?
Just trying to be more authentic in who you are, and yeah, just being okay with some people are not going to be happy, and that's okay.
And that's okay. What keeps you up at night?
My baby.
Legitimate, yes. I can vouch.
Yeah.
100%. What would you do for work if money was no object?
I really like my work setup right now. I would continue doing that. I love optometry. I really do think it's the best job. We have the best jobs. It is so amazing. We get to make difference in patients' lives. We don't really have to deal with anything hard. We have ophthalmologists for that. It's awesome.
Fair point. Hopefully, there's no ophthalmologist listening, right? And what task or activity um, helps you get into a flow state where like time just disappears?
Definitely skiing and biking, for
Skiing
sure.
and biking.
Yes, those are my favorite.
Love it.
Can't think about anything else.
Mountain biking, road biking, what are you into?
Yeah, mountain biking.
Mountain
Downhill
biking.
skiing and mountain biking. Yeah.
All right, you mentioned that. You're an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, totally.
All right, good. So now to the last one. This is called Youre Welcome. And if you've seen the movie Moana, this is taken from the song that's sang in there that's called Youre Welcome, where the character is kind of explaining all the wonderful things he's done for the world, and then he's just saying, "You're welcome" for all of those things. So this is a chance for you, our amazing guest, to share one really big, profound piece of information, a quote, something, a piece of advice, whatever you want to share that's going to help change our lives, myself and the audience listening, for the better. And we will then say a big thank you, and you'll say you're welcome.
Well, anyway, let me say you're welcome for the wonderful world you know.
So, Mindy, what is one big piece of advice or a quote or something profound that you can share with us?
I really feel like time management is important. Building your ideal schedule and then living your life so that you can hopefully follow that ideal schedule rather than waiting for retirement. Because, you can always work and get more money, but you can never get more time.
Always get more money, but you can never get more time. Now that is profound. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes. Mindy Blumberg, she got it.
Hey, it's okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Blumberg. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. This is a really important message. I think a conversation that we're going to have more and more. Hopefully we will kind of convert some of our colleagues that are currently naysayers or skeptical about remote optometry, and we'll see more and more of them get into it. And as I start to get into it, I'm going to be reaching out to you. I'm going to be looking into, remind me again of the website.
Optometry.com.
Future Proof Optometry?
Yes.
futureproofoptometry.com. I'll put it in the show notes, so make sure you click that link and check that out. Once again, thank you, Dr. Blumberg. Appreciate you being.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you to everybody who's listening and watching the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I will see you guys in the next episode.